love our new intro. I still haven't had time to like stick it into OBS and like change out the graphic to the audio so that it is our graphics. And I don't know when I'm going to have that kind of time, but I will find that time or pay somebody to do it. One of those two things. But yes, new intro, screaming guitar, given to us by Ben from last week's stream, or last time stream, episode 99. I'm so excited. So yeah, hello, GitOpsians. Yeah, hats off. It's fine. Welcome to episode 100. We wore our fedoras for like a minute to celebrate episode 100. We were really excited. And joining us for this milestone is Gerald Nunn, who is actually the GitOps OpenShift GitOps technical marketing manager. So he's the real face of GitOps at Red Hat. And Jonny and I are just hobbyists.
I wouldn't say that. I think everybody these days is the face of GitOps. It's so mature now, right? And so prevalent.
It's so mature now. Yeah, it's really come a long way.
But as I always say, I'm glad you and Jonny are continuing on with this, because when I took over this job, one of the things I told Eric was I did not want to do a podcast every 2 weeks. That's not my jam. Once in a while is fine, but so you guys do a great job, and we really appreciate it.
Well, it's also great for us because it's just such a nice break from everything. I always tell people this is my time to be professionally stupid. I mean, inquisitive. I mean, stupid. Even if I do know something, I get to ask the stupid questions, which is really, really fun for me. And different because I'm just getting to ask different people the stupid questions. Let's be real. I always ask stupid questions.
Well, I always play the village idiot like extremely well. Yeah. You know, like it comes natural to me, and so yeah, it's and being able to ask people like Gerald or Ben when they're on and stuff like that, like just the questions that everybody else is maybe hopefully going to ask, and it's like, hey, well, just kind of pops in my mind, like, hey, well, what about this? What about this?
Yeah,
it's just kind of fun to nerd out.
It's super fun. But yeah, so we don't really have any announcements this week, so I think Gerald just gets to just jump straight into his exciting topic, and I know he has a lot of stuff to show us today.
Yeah, it should be fun. So as Hilliary mentioned, I'm the GitOps technical marketing manager at Red Hat, but interestingly, my internal team got kind of not reorged, but recategorized or rebranded as the AI and Edge team. And I think as Hilliary and Jonny knows, everybody at Red Hat's kind of a mandate to do more with AI or do some stuff with AI in terms of getting up to speed and leveraging it. So my manager, Eric Jacobs, who does a lot of stuff with AI, kind of said, hey, what if you brought OpenShift Lightspeed into the ArgoCD UI? And that's essentially what this project that we're going to talk about today is. So if you're not familiar with OpenShift Lightspeed, maybe we could start there, and I'll just share my screen. Screen, share. There we go. Can you see my screen okay?
Yep.
Okay. So down here, if you have the Lightspeed operator installed, you get this thing going. Let me navigate to something with, say, some pods. And if we go into, say, this pod here, and you go over here, then you get this chatbot where you can start asking questions about, whatever is in the console on the screen that you want to ask about. So you can attach different things to it, like the resource. So let's attach the pod file to it. And then let's attach some logs, and we'll do, say, 50 lines or so, attach that. And then I can ask a question like, are there any problems with this pod? And go ahead and run that. And then it will come back and give me an answer in terms of, whether it detects problems or not. So on with this pod, it takes a few seconds. And then you see here, it's basically going through and analyzing the logs and the YAML that I uploaded, and off we go. So the idea is really, hey, can we bring the same experience into ArgoCD? So that's what we're going to show today, and that's essentially what I've built. Now, there is documentation for this project. It's right here on the assistant for ArgoCD, and it tells you how to go through and install and do all that. And we'll kind of talk a little bit about the architecture and how things work as we go through it. But just as a first step, there are docs, and you can look at them there. So let's look at what is available now in the upstream project that I'm working on. So if I bring up my ArgoCD, I should open up a new tab here, click on that, log in via OpenShift. Oh, actually, that's the wrong one. Sorry, hang on. Let me back up for a second. Go back here. It's the cluster one I need. There we go. So log into my cluster ArgoCD. And so if I click on one of these projects, let's say we go into the cert manager operator and I go into, say, the cert manager deploy, you can see my extension here is adding a new thing called assistant to it. And if I go in, I can ask questions about this resource. I'm just going to turn on my developer tools as well, because I want to get a bit into how this is actually working behind the scenes.
Ooh, that's exciting. The console.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
The reason why is because sometimes people think the one upstream is using MCP, and it's not. And it's kind of interesting to see what it's actually doing on the networking call. So you can see here, it tells you, can I help you with this resource that I'm looking at, which is the deployment. And I notice this resource has logs available. You can attach logs as needed. So let me go ahead and say attach. And unlike Lightspeed, I'm essentially doing a guided conversation flow here. We'll pick the cert manager operator. Go for that. And then it will tell me how many lines do I want to attach. And there is a limit to the lines, just like in Lightspeed. And there's a reason for that. And we'll get into that in a second when we start going through the network side. Go ahead and do that. Now my logs are attached, and I can go, are there any problems with this deployment? Go ahead and ask the question. And please work, please work, please work.
I know, right? I told you, I reminded you yesterday to sacrifice to the demo gods.
I just tested this and it worked fine, but there we go. So it comes through and it gives you an answer, similar that we saw with Lightspeed, where it says, hey, everything looks good. There's no problems. And it gives me a breakdown of different things that it's looking at and going through that, right? Some things you can probably notice here is my formatting is not quite as good as Lightspeed. It's surprisingly difficult getting markup to look good in HTML. And I'm also using an upstream chat component rather than writing my own from scratch. So it makes it a little more difficult to control some of the formatting, but it's something I'm continuing to work on to prepare. But you can see the logs that I uploaded. I looked at those and said, hey, everything looks good. And like I said, when people use this, they sometimes think, oh, MCP must be involved because it was able to get this information. And there's actually no MCP. It's all just the extension doing it. If you look at the streaming query here, network activity,
you might need to like Control plus a lot.
Let me do that. Yeah.
And I'll go full screen here too. So
yeah, there we go. That's much better.
All right. So you can see that it did a payload here, but one of the things that it does is that it does attachments. Come on, open up. There we go. And we can see there's a couple of attachments. So there's the API object, which is the actual, YAML file that I'm attaching. And then there's another attachment with the logs, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, normally it would automatically attach events, but I suspect this one doesn't have any, so it didn't get attached in this case. But these are all part of the context, and this is why you have to limit the number of lines, because if you give it like a multi-thousand line log file, OpenAI or whatever LLM provider you're using is going to start complaining that, hey, this is too big. I can't process this, right? You're going to exhaust all your quota of tokens on that request.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why we're kind of limiting the logs here. So right now the assistant in the upstream version supports two backends. It supports the Lightspeed backend for anybody that's on OpenShift and doesn't want to deploy a separate, Llama stack, but it also supports Llama stack. So folks that are using non-OpenShift Kubernetes distributions, they can just deploy Llama stack, and this assistant will use that in order to do the inferencing. So the key thing right here, like I said, is this is all inference based right now. Right. And it's all just using an inference engine. There's no MCP involved in this whatsoever. And that's kind of where I am right now with this. And like I said, for the next step, we would kind of look at some work I have in progress, which is doing the MCP stuff. Any questions or thoughts on this so far, Hilliary or Jonny?
So actually on the thoughts, like honestly, even 250 lines of logs is a lot. To be like having something just go through, like if it's kind of like after that many logs, I'm kind of questioning like, why are your logs so noisy that you would need more? Like what's happening in your logs to like be generating so many lines? And also like, what are you looking for? Like, is it like, are you looking for some needle in a haystack that is necessitating you to need so many lines of logs analyzed? And if that's the situation, you should be, pushing your logs into some other kind of storage thing and then having something analyze it in that location, as opposed to like on the fly, on demand. So like from a use case perspective, I honestly think 250 is an extremely generous amount. I really can't think of anything that I would actively be doing, like investigating an incident or anything like that, that would actively be doing where I really am going to be looking that far back in the logs, like in pod logs. That's not where I'm looking for it. At that point, I've gone to where we ship our logs and I'm using queries and other things to be more intentional as opposed to just like base scanning around.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense. And I think for a lot of use cases, that's fine. Once you get more into this, a system level and you have multiple systems you're trying to interact with, then, things like MCP come into play, which we'll go to next.
Yeah.
But, for a lot of people, what this provides is still great, particularly for people that are, say, new to Kubernetes or new to ArgoCD, being able to go into the chat bot right there and just ask a question like, if I go to the cluster here and the cert manager cluster and I go, what is this resource? I don't need to Google it or anything. I can just get an AI prompt in terms of telling me, what Cert Manager is all about, right? And so if I've never seen this thing before, hey, that's great. I get some basic information about what it's used for and how it works. And, I can get a lot of info that way because, as you know, Kubernetes is complicated and OpenShift even more so, just given all the operators and resources that are available in an OpenShift cluster, right?
So if you had an app that was out of, sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, I like that the documentation specifically shows the example of like, hey, does this resource conform to known best practices? That's another great, that's a solid example that is in the official documentation. So like, agreed on exactly like to your point.
Yeah, and when using the Lightspeed backend, it gives you a lot of nice links to the docs that correspond with your query, so you can dig further into things if you need to as well at that point. Sorry, Johnny, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, so if you have like an application or something that's out of sync, could you like, hey, why is this app out of sync? Like, or how could I configure this to where it won't show up as out of sync? You know what I mean? Like, you can do like the I can't remember what it's called, where you go into the config and you just say basically ignore ignore the specific field for certain things that get overwritten all the time.
Right. So this application's out of sync. I can go in and ask it, and let's see what it says. So for the application object, you have to go to the assistant at the application level because that's the resource that's going to get attached. If you ask it like, why is this application out of sync when you're looking at, say, a deployment, it will be totally confused because it knows nothing about the application, right? Let's try it. Why is this application out of sync? And we wait.
This is where I find it being really useful because Argo sometimes is like when you're trying to dig in and figure out like what's causing the out of sync, it's like, what is happening right now? And yeah, to have something where you could just kind of get that feedback.
Yeah. So does it give me any? It tells me that it's out of sync. It knows it, but it doesn't really give me information about why it's out of sync. And just thinking now, the information should be in the application object. Like, it'd be nice if it would at least point to the resource that is out of sync in the in there, but it's not doing that. So that's interesting use case, and maybe some additional tuning is needed. But and this is going to lead to the next topic as well when we get there in the future. Is context is everything. So I'm finding out with this thing.
Yes.
The more context you can provide it, and the more specific the question, the better the response you're going to get out of it. And I am still spending quite a bit of time trying to figure out the context aspects and how to tune that to make it more relevant in different areas. So this is a good example, Johnny. Thank you.
So, it's interesting because one of the things that can really help with that, at least when you're like talking about code bases, is like instruction files, right? Like you have agents.md, which is like governed by the Linux Foundation. And it's like a just a markdown format of instruction files. And like, there's no one way to do an instruction file. Like there's some recommendations, of course, but like you can provide a ton of context in the instruction file. So I think what we really just would be helpful here is some way of adding an instruction file first. And that way you don't have to give the context every single time with your new question or your new query. Is like you have a set instruction file somewhere.
Yeah, and I do have instructions, but they're not configurable right now. And as I'm going through this, I'm starting to realize this needs to be more configurable. Because, you know, instructions for one organization might be completely different than instructions that are suitable for another organization, right? And basically my starting point was taking the OLS instructions and then just tweaking it for ArgoCD, right? And making and that. So it's definitely an area that could use some improvement. And I'm hoping as more people use it, you know, we can optimize this a bit more. But I think to your point, Hilary, this is probably something that needs to be configurable. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think you, or at least, you know, they say closest instruction file to the thing wins. So like at least the ability, if not to configure that one, to supplement it with another one, like just overwrite it.
Yeah, you don't want to give users the ability to do instructions because that potentially lets them circumvent guardrails. Like there were some guardrails in these instructions about you can't do this, you can't do that.
Yeah, you can't connect to the internet, or you can't run a Google search with this or anything like that, you know, whatever it is.
Yeah, exactly. But from an organization perspective, you know, the platform administrator, I do agree. I think they need the ability to tune this.
Yeah, I mean, that ability needs to be behind some RBAC, I would say. But yeah, I would say so. I love, like, feel free to chat with me offline a little bit more if you want to. We can kind of think through what that design would need to look like. But I think that the platform team would need the ability to add specific instructions.
Yeah. And then a bit on if there's no questions about the assistance itself, I thought it might be worthwhile just doing a quick overview of how this thing gets installed and some of the technical challenges that I had with it, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So first off, the way extensions work in Argo is a challenge in itself. Every time you flip tabs in Argo, it unloads the extension. And then when you go back to it, it reloads it. So one of the things I have to do is basically save all this information in the session store, the browser session store, and restore it if you're coming back to the same resource, right? So if you're flipping tabs, you can't really tell that it's actually reloading the context again, but that's what's happening under the hood. And then if I switch to a different resource, it just drops the context and then starts it from scratch for the new resource. So that's kind of one thing that's interesting. The downside of that approach is that, you know, if I start trying to troubleshoot two things at once, I'm losing the context by flipping between them, right? But the reason why I'm not doing it is I'm really worried about overloading the session state with a bunch of stuff.
Yeah,
and how to garbage collect it and manage it. It gets to be very complicated very quickly. So that's kind of the one downside of the way Argo extensions work. From a configuration point of view, and I'm going to be showing this from an OpenShift operator perspective because that's what I'm using, but it's not really that much different than if you're doing it you know, with upstream ArgoCD. You go look at my ArgoCD here, go look in the one in OpenShift GitOps because that's what I'm doing. Go look at the YAML. So the first thing we'll notice is that there's, you have to basically in the server, the ArgoCD server, load the extension. Argo provides an extension installer for that. And there's the rollout one, but down here is the assistant one, and it's getting installed as well. Oh, that's the setting, sorry. Why did I call it rollout extensions? That's interesting. I got a typo there. I got to fix that. I know why. The way the rollout extensions work with ArgoCD, the operator, is it creates a mount for it, and I'm just reusing it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So I'm just using the same mount for everything. So there's the extension assistant. So it's installing the assistant. Now, interestingly, Argo assistants do not provide any mechanism whatsoever, or Argo extensions, to get configuration. And you can't use the Argo API to, like, say, look at a config map or something like that because the context you're in may not have access to that config map. So Michael Crenshaw had a great idea. He was like, hey, why don't you put the settings in as a different extension and just make them global variables in the browser? So that's what I'm doing. I've got this extensions for configuring like what model you want and that kind of stuff, but you have to build it as a separate Argo extension, and I have an example of how to do that out there. But it's kind of a little bit of extra complexity in terms of you know, configuring and managing the extension. And then the last thing down here is there is a proxy. Let me just do a Control F proxy. Not that one. There, this one here. You've got to basically enable the proxy extension, and it will basically, you have to define a proxy extension, because what it does is it will tunnel all the traffic for either Lightspeed or Llama Stack through ArgoCD, through an ArgoCD proxy extension. You need that because of CORS, cross-origin resources.
Yeah.
You can't make requests
Mhm.
out of this browser direct. Whoops, sorry, the one that I was running with the extension directly out of this to like Llama Stack or to Lightspeed, right? It's got to be tunneled through something. So I'm just using an ArgoCD proxy extension to do that. So those are basically the three things that need to be configured to use the current version of the extension. It's a little bit more fiddly than I like, but it works pretty good, and you only have to do it once and they're off to the races. So that's kind of from a technical perspective how it gets set up and deployed.
All right, yeah, that makes sense. I'm just impressed at the clever thinking of loading the configuration as an additional extension.
I can't take credit for that. Michael Crenshaw, like I said, came up with that.
Yeah.
He's the main, well, I shouldn't say the main one, but probably the most prolific maintainer on ArgoCD these days. The amount of commits that guy does is crazy. And he had that idea. And I was like, yeah, that could actually work. And he actually solved my other problem, which we'll get to next, which is on the MCP side.
Yeah.
So if there's no more questions on this, the next thing I'm going to do is maybe show a couple slides to kind of show where I'm going. And we'll do a bit of demo of things that kind of work. And we'll have fun poking the bear and seeing where problems are and talking more about some of the challenges around context and MCP when you use them.
Yeah, let's do that.
All right, so let me go to my slides here. So go slideshow. So one of the reasons why I, kind of standardized on Llama Stack, and Lightspeed itself is going to be using Llama Stack as well, is because you can plug in MCP servers into it, and you can have a much more nuanced ability to troubleshoot, find issues, etc. Because the MCP servers can interact, and if you're not familiar with MCP, that's Model Context Protocol. They can interact with different systems in order to gather additional information for the LLM without you having to provide that in the context. And there's kind of three different flavors where I'm kind of thinking about MCP. The one that most people are using nowadays and are familiar with is local MCP. You're using, like, say, Cursor or Claude, and you've got MCP servers hooked up to it. And from an identity perspective, this is easy peasy because you're a single user. You can just give it tokens that represent you as the user to go to the back end. So, for example, for the MCP for Argo server, I can just give it my ArgoCD token, right? And then it can do things on my behalf with the same rights and privileges I have. Same with OpenShift or Kubernetes. I can give it my user token and off it goes to the races and does things it wants and so on and so forth. Easy peasy. The problem, though, is, that's the chatbot. We'll skip that. And this is where I am now. Browser, ArgoCD server, Llama Stack. And the context is all coming, from the extension. It's providing all those things that we saw earlier. And there's no credentials required, right? It's pure inference. But this is where I'm moving towards, is basically getting the MCP servers working. And this is leading to some additional complexity, both in the setup and the underlying code base. So essentially, I've got a browser going through, and anything using path-based routing or path-based ingresses, anything with / goes to the ArgoCD server, but anything with a / assistant goes to a new pod that I'm running, which is a reverse proxy prod. I can no longer use the Argo proxy extension because with MCP, I need to do a lot more things in terms of rewriting requests, and we'll get into the why of that in a second. That will then go to Llama Stack. It will pass on the ArgoCD token that it picks up because, again, these are in the same domain. They're just different paths. I get the ArgoCD token from the browser, just like the ArgoCD server does. I can pass it on. And then Llama Stack then in turn has all of its MCP, and these are the ones I've got configured right now. So the MCP for Argo will automatically get this token because the reverse proxy is essentially doing token substitution automatically and setting that in there. But for these other ones, you still have to hard code it. I don't have a way to deal with that right now. There is a way to deal with it in the future, and we'll talk about that after I do a little bit more demoing on that. But, the big challenge here is really going to always be identity management and SSO. And like I said, there may be a way to kind of partially solve this, and we'll get that in a second. But why do I need this reverse proxy, and what is it actually doing under the hood, and what's the problem with it? So if we go look at the code for a second, and we look at the Llama Stack provider 2, this is TypeScript. If you're not familiar with it, do you need this bigger?
Yeah, a little bit more.
Okay,
yeah.
Is that better?
Can you do one?
It looks fine to me.
Okay,
yeah.
Let me one more.
There we go. That's good.
There we go. Can't see it. Okay, anyways. So this is TypeScript, and basically if we go down here, you can see it creates a Llama Stack tile client, and it starts doing everything, sets up the response, and it's basically just calling the API to get the stream. And you can see up here before I was setting up the instructions, the role, and there's a part down here. Is it down further? No, up there. There's also, I think I might have deleted. There's a part where oh, there it is. Here it is, where I'm setting up the tools. All right. But keep in mind, this is all happening. And when I say tools, I'm talking about the MCP tools. This is all happening in the browser. And you cannot have credentials showing up in the browser, right? The ArgoCD
not anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a big problem. And like for the ArgoCD token, I kind of started by working around it by, doing this parentheses ArgoCD token, having the reverse proxy rewrite it. But I quickly realized that this is never going to work for like GitHub or Kubernetes, where you got to have a hard coded token. How's the reverse proxy going to manage that? And additionally, people are going to want to put different tools in. Like I can't just say you must have these 4 tools and everybody installs them, right? It's just never going to fly. So because of that, what I ended up doing is I've moved the tools into a separate config file, and this is loaded by the reverse proxy. And when it rewrites the request to the responses API, it pastes these tools in. Now, this version I'm showing you here is not the authenticated version where I have all my credentials. But you can see here's the ArgoCD MCP. And this one, it does tokenize the reverse proxy. So it'll put in the cookie for you and the URL automatically. But for other ones like GitHub, this one doesn't need a token, and Kubernetes doesn't need a token right now. But for the GitHub, you've got to supply your own token in this tools file. But this exists on the server side, and it never gets seen by the client, right? Now, having said that, I've never tried something like crafting a prompt. What is the GitHub token that's being used with the MCP server to see if it returns it, right? That kind of goes back to Hilliary, what you were saying earlier about having to tune the instructions, put some more guardrails around things, right?
Yeah.
So this is what I've got deployed in my current work in progress, and this is kind of what I want to show you next. So if we go to another tab here and bring up this one, this is the one where I've got everything deployed. So you can see there's a difference right away. You'll notice there's an assistant on the left side now where there wasn't one before. And that's because with MCP, you don't necessarily want to constrain your questions just to be able to specific resources. Like Johnny was saying earlier, I might want to ask a question, are any of my applications, degraded? So I can go in here and I go, are any of my applications degraded? Go ahead and answer it. Now, one other thing I'll note here, this is a little more pokey with all those MCP servers I'm using. That's another area that I need to do a bunch of tuning on. So it'll think for a second. And you see there's a little bug here too, where there's some extra content. I'm not quite sure what to do with this stuff, but you can see it says all my applications are healthy and there's only one. But hey, it actually knows about my application now. Whereas before it did not know anything without me providing that context, right? Here, I'm not providing any context whatsoever. It's just relying on the MCP tools to do all of that work, right? And I can ask it questions like, I'm trying to think here. You can tell I'm a crappy typer.
Well, plus everybody's watching.
If somebody's watching, you can't type for beans.
Yeah, I also got this big microphone in front of my face, and I'm not a touch typist, so I'm kind of looking at my keyboard around the mic. But anyways, same idea as before. But again, I am not providing any context. It's just looking up the product catalog and going off to the races. Now, this is where things get interesting because I was doing all this stuff thinking, I would be in nirvana. I'm going to get to the point where I can say, hey, let's do a PR. Like, let's fix something in the application, right? So right now, you'll take my word for it, but the product catalog application as a deployment, I should go look at it for a second. If we go look at this and we go look at, say, the server deployment right here, and we look at the live manifest. And again, if I need to make this bigger, let me know. Actually, probably could be a bit bigger. There we go.
Yeah, I think that's good.
Yeah. So we look at this, we go look at the image. You can see, oh, Gerald's doing a terrible practice here. He's using the latest tag. Never use the latest tag in the real world, right? It's a bad idea. So let's see if we can go ahead and fix that thing. So my first attempt was going
fascinated that it didn't capture that in the best practices output?
Well, that was the best practices for the application, not for the resources the application deploys. Again, it goes back to that whole context is everything, right? And how you ask the question is important to get the results that you want. But let's go ahead and have some fun here. And I'm going to say, hey, create a PR that uses the digest instead of the latest tag for the product deployment and give me a link to the PR. Now this one's going to be really pokey. I got to warn you up front. If assuming it works, fingers crossed.
It's going to be amazing.
We may go get tea while we wait.
Okay, so actually it's going back faster than I did yesterday. So you can see first it's using the MCP server to figure out what is the digest, right? So it's going to using the Docker MCP server to go to my quay.io, pull out the digest for that, and you see it did that. And then it'll continue on and try to create a PR for it, and this is where we're going to start getting into problems. So you can see it's doing some thinking, it's outputting some stuff, blah, blah, blah. It'll take a little while. But just to kind of get ahead of things a little bit here, what we'll see is that there's a decidingly lack of context for it to be able to operate correctly or as expected, right? And I am not anywhere near my Gerald's utopia view of how things should work, right? It kind of feel like, I don't know if you guys ever had, there was a toy when I was growing up called the Armatron. It was like a little robot arm that you could had little joysticks that would move left and right. And my wife always tell the story that when she was a kid, she really wanted that thing because she figured like cleaning her room would be so easy. She could just use the Armatron to move everything around, right? And then she got it and she realized this thing is not very good and doesn't work anywhere near as well as the commercials portrayed it to work, right? And I kind of feel like this is like that Armatron. You kind of have this utopian vision where, hey, the AI is going to do all this stuff for me. And then you realize, there we go. So it created the pull request. So let's go look at it. Okay, so here's my pull request. So first thing is this is the wrong repo.
Oh, yeah.
The deployment is not in here, right? And if we go look at what the files changed and what it changed, you can see that it did the pull request, but what it actually changed was it changed this last applied configuration. I'm just looking for it in here. If you guys have better eyes than me, you can see the digest in here, or did it? Maybe it didn't even do it this time. Last time it put the digest in this thing instead of the actual image tag. And the reason why it's doing this, if you remember back to the earliest slide, is because it doesn't have any context from the application object. It doesn't know the product catalog deployment is in the product catalog application. It didn't try to use ArgoCD to find that information out, right? So that's why it just kind of tried to figure out, based on my Git token, which repo was the best one, and I'm just going to stuff this thing in there, right? And you also notice too that it didn't prompt me for more information, right? It just went ahead and did it. And it that goes back to your point about the instructions again, Hilary, where some instructions about prompt the user if you're not sure would go a long way, I think, to helping this out. So let's go ahead and close this one because this is a useless commit. And we're going to try this in a different spot where it's got more context. So let's say, okay, we recognize there's a problem there. Let's go back to our, no, not that one. Sorry. Oh, I forgot.
Oh, it opens in the same link. Yeah.
It opens in the same link. Yeah. So let's go back to the application and we'll try doing a prompt in there because here it's got the application object, right? So let's see how we can see if we get a better result here. Create a pull request. I could probably say PR and it would understand it, but I'm just being careful. Updates the product catalog deployment in this application. I'll try to be very specific to use the digest instead of the image tag. Now, do you folks think there's some more context I should apply here? Is it any different ways you would frame this or add some additional info?
I would say to create a pull request in the correct repository that updates the product catalog deployment. And then I would actually decide, ask me if you're not sure. So use a so I think you might confuse it there with like where it says like I would say repository the application is defined in, not using, because I think that the word using will be confusing there. Is defined in or configured in, yeah. Deployed from?
Okay, are you okay with that?
I think it'll still get confused.
Yeah, let's go ahead and see.
Yeah, close enough for government work.
Johnny would know.
I would know, actually. Oh, nice.
So it's actually the specific deployment from the ArgoCD's application reported summary.images field that you want to update. I'm not sure what it's. Oh, I didn't get to answer 2.
Let's see if it remembers its questioning and comes back to you.
Well, it should remember it because essentially with the responses API I'm using, you always have to link back to the previous response. So it creates a chain of these responses that Llama Stack and OpenAI are tracking. So it knows the conversation flow that you had previously. I almost need to have a clear button at some point to remove all that. It looks like there's an issue accessing the deployment. Yeah, so
that's what I was going to ask you.
This is getting. Sorry, go ahead, Johnny.
No. I'm sorry. I was just going to ask you if like there's a way to clear the context, because sometimes like you'll get an answer and it's kind of like biased to the answer it gave you, and then you'll need to clear the context and ask it again with some of the different criteria.
Yeah, right now the only way to clear it is to jump between this and something else and then come back again to clear it. But it's definitely a good idea to add that. You can see it's asking me about. I kind of did a pretty good job. Let's see. Actually, that's not the right folder. So we go look at where this actually is in GitHub. And this is kind of the other problem it will have with ArgoCD is dealing with the YAML management tools. So we go into repositories. I think it's the first one here. So I'm using Customize, right? And from its perspective, it has no idea how Customize kind of rolls up everything into the actual deployment. So it's like, okay, it's this file that it needs to change. Let me see if I prompt it with that. But at this point, you're kind of thinking this is more work than if I just did it myself.
Yeah.
Actually, I need all that. Sorry. Come on. To Hillary's point, once you're on a call and you're trying to do something, everything's fiddly. Yeah. So let's see if we prompt it with this, because the correct path is. The other thing I could have tried having it do is to update the customization file with the, the edit image blob. That might have worked well too. Oh, and there's a bit of a bug in this one because I'm fiddling around with the CSS. You can see the prompt is coming above instead of below.
Yeah.
Yeah. Don't worry about that. It'll get fixed at some point. The other issue with ArgoCD and these kind of extensions is dealing with CSS. It's not really an ArgoCD issue per se, but you're trying to craft the CSS in a way that fills the screen, and that's surprisingly difficult in HTML.
I have found every time I've gone to use CSS that it doesn't work the way the documentation says it does.
Yeah, it's a many layered beast. And like I said, because I'm inheriting CSS from Argo, I'm kind of bound by what they have as well. So it makes it different. But anyways, it created the PR. Let's see what it did. There we go. Look at the file change. But you can see one nice thing it does put a nice kind of description in there, right? We look at the file changed. So this is not very good. Did it actually make, so it did actually change the image, but it removed a lot of stuff.
Also removed everything else.
So this is kind of what I'm getting at in terms of it sort of works, but man, there's a lot. It probably needs a lot more context. Like I probably could have told it to only update the image field and nothing else.
I feel like update inherently means update, not delete and not replace. You know what I mean? Like that does seem like an odd one to have to spend. I mean, you know, the computer is only as smart as the people who trained it, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing too to keep in mind is that I'm using an OpenAI model. I think it's the GPT-4o1. I have no idea if that's the best model, if another model would perform better.
Oh, well, yeah, it depends on the size of the model, right? Because the smaller ones will come back faster, but they're less accurate. So if you use a bigger one, it will come back more accurate, but slower.
Yeah.
So you just like, there's trade-offs there.
Absolutely. And I haven't done any tuning of this. Like I want to try the Gemini model at some point because I think it would actually probably give me some better results in some ways. But it goes back to the whole, there's a lot of tuning to make this kind of stuff effectively. But the one thing I did want to highlight here, like this is incredibly a bad PR, but the nice thing with GitOps and using AI with GitOps is you can work through PRs and have humans review it, right? It's not making direct changes on my cluster where it's like, oh my God, what did you do? You just deleted my production database, right? Everything being a PR means that the human is always in the loop and in reviewing and making sure that things are good. And I think that's a huge benefit, you know, in terms of using AI assisted ops and this kind of chatbot thing with GitOps that maybe is not as prevalent in other kind of systems, right?
Yeah, and I like
that's pretty cool.
You know, Gerald, you and I were having a concept about things, you know, being more proactive and agentic in the pre-show tech check, right? And like, there's one thing that if you could get it wired up, which would be really cool, it'd be like for it to, like, let's say that, you know, something goes from you know, like syncing to like out of sync, right? If that could, let's say something like Alert Manager or whatever, like triggered a webhook to your Argo agent, and your Argo agent did or not Argo agent, because Argo agent is the other thing. Your assistant, excuse me, your agentic assistant, then did a little initial investigation and then sent, maybe not a pull request, but maybe just sent you know, via a Slack webhook, sent a Slack message saying, hey, this went out of sync and here's what we know.
Yep. Like even a message and a basic diagnosis of it. I think it's this. Could you look at it?
Yeah.
Very, very useful for sure. And that's kind of getting me back to my slides here because I want to get to that use case as well. So let me just go here for a second. So this is kind of what I showed you right now, right? So we're using Llama Stack directly with all these MCP servers, and results are kind of iffy, but you know, there's potential there basically, right? And some tuning, some improvements in instructions, adding more context, I think would get it to a lot better place. But I still have to deal with those hard-coded tokens. And, you know, for the future, the thing that's kind of interesting is Red has a project they're working on called this MCP gateway, part of the Quadrant connectivity link project. And the nice thing with what Quadrant and the MCP gateway is doing is that essentially you can provide it, like say with one OIDC token, in my case, it would be the ArgoCD one, and then it will use the IDP to do token exchange for everything else, right? Mm-hmm. So like, for example, if your Kubernetes or OpenShift is configured for external OpenID Connect, which became available, I think, in 420, you know, I could just quickly exchange that Argo token for an OpenShift token for that same user, right? And get the right privileges. Now, that's not always going to work. You're going to have systems, as you folks know, that are not homogeneous, and like, you know, SaaS systems like say GitHub, for example, or other things where you can't do that. And the nice thing with Quadrant is it also gives you the ability to look up a token from say Vault that might be more specific to that user than just a generic all-in-one token, right? Yeah, sorry, Hilliary, didn't mean to cut you off there.
Oh, sorry, no, I was gonna say, yeah, I think that's really where the power is going to be, is when you can just tell it where to go get the tokens from, right? And then use the references to tokens as opposed to the tokens.
Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm going to look at in the future, but I'm not going to include this MCP gateway with the assistant, because I've externalized the tools configuration now. If somebody wanted to plug in the MCP gateway instead of that, just have one tool pointing to Quadrant, the MCP gateway, they could do that, right? So it would be done that way. But I would probably want to test it and maybe put some documentation in terms of how to use it once it gets a little more mature. And that kind of brings to the next thing, Hilliary, which you're going down, was agentic ops. Because one thing I'm realizing with this assistant is that it's great for a human to notice something or to specifically ask about the degraded applications. But as Hilliary was kind of getting at, it'd be great if you could kind of do this in an automated way, right? Or have something helping you continuously, proactively in the background. So I've been doing some light, I've been doing some light thinking about this. And when I say light, I mean really light, because I am not an AI guru or, super deep into AI. But I kind of think, you kind of need something like a prompt orchestrator, which is essentially, a combination of using APIs and prompts to kind of get to a certain state. So for example, the prompt orchestrator might make an API called ArgoCD and say, hey, give me all the applications that are degraded, and it gives you 5 apps. And then you feed them one by one with prompts saying, hey, LLM with MCP, can you look at application XYZ? Tell me why it's not working and whether it's something that you can remediate or we need to send it to a human to deal with, right? And you could kind of have a branching tree structure for those prompts. If the prompt returns different things, you could do different things with maybe a combination of regular expressions and other things, or feeding it back into the LLM to refine. But that's kind of where I'm thinking. The nice thing with this kind of system is from an SSO identity problem, you don't have that issue anymore, because you can, again, just like the local version, just give it hard-coded tokens, right? You know exactly what scope you're trying to solve with that agentic ops. So you can give it tokens that allow it to have the permissions to do what it needs to do within that scope, but no more, right? So again, it kind of fixes that problem a bit with the MCP. So really the identity problem is really only from my perspective, on the chatbot side more than the agentic side. But I might be thinking this too simply. I don't know. What do you think, Hilliary and Jonny?
Oh, I think it's awesome.
I think you're generally on the right track. I have to give it a little bit of a deeper think. I don't think there's one way to skin this cat. That's a horrible thing to say, but I don't think there's one way to approach this problem. So it's like high level sounds good to me. Let's get in there. I lost my network a couple times in the middle of everything. I don't know if that was really clear. I may not have caught all of the context. I'm having some
that's
issues.
Perfect. Yeah, we didn't. From my perspective, you didn't drop. I think I heard everything you said. So
yeah.
Okay, that's great.
Yeah.
I didn't hear everything you said. I've had a couple times. It's cut a couple times on me to.
Well, that's great, because there was one point where I was really bad mouthing you. So hopefully,
dang it, Gerald. Well, that's fine, because what'll have it is the recording, so I will get my revenge.
Oh, I didn't think of that.
But sometimes keeping it simple is like the best approach too, right? Like I don't know, like I can't see anything like I'm sure that there's probably chinks in the armor or something like that, but like just on the surface, keeping it simple, it's probably the best approach, at least especially for now, like when you're trying to figure everything out.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm definitely not saying I'm going to be tackling that agentic ops. I'm just kind of thinking, hey, it would be great if there was a open source project or something else that kind of provided that pluggable orchestrator layer, right? And some tools to interact with prompts and LLMs and kind of in a guided flow is kind of, or guided conversation.
And so there is Holmes GPT. I don't know if you've seen much of that. We've
No,
had
I've not seen that.
on. Yeah, you should definitely check out Holmes GPT. I love it a lot. I think it's a really great project. And it kind of has some of that going. And they've done a lot of work specifically. So it comes from Robusta, and Robusta is like a smaller startup. They do observability and so forth. And we've had them on a few times. Natan always comes on and gives a great demo. But so yeah, Holmes GPT kind of has that going for it right now. And it's what I use when I'm mucking about with agentic AI on my personal machine. And so yeah, it does that. And what they've done a lot of tuning to make it actually specifically understand not just Kubernetes, but also OpenShift specifically. So it has a lot of that already done. So I would take a look at that because it's a really strong project with a really strong community. And like also their maintainers are super, super accessible and responsive. So
nice. Thanks for the tip.
But I think they don't. I don't want to preempt. I believe last time Natan was on, they said they were working on getting it donated to the CNCF. I think there's a pull request up for that right now.
Oh, that'd be awesome.
Yeah. Microsoft joined on for sponsoring it. So they like HolmesGPT. They recommend it for AKS users. But you know, we here at GitOps Guide to the Galaxy have been with the HolmesGPT program for like since the beginning, I feel like.
You're trailblazers.
We're trailblazers. I mean, that's what we do here though. We literally go find the coolest emerging things and talk about it. So
absolutely. Well, that was basically what I had to show today. If you had any other questions or thoughts, or are there any questions from the audience? I didn't notice anything.
We had a good amount of viewers, but they were surprisingly silent today. So I guess you preempted everybody's questions, or they'll send them in post.
Yeah, we'll maybe give them a few seconds to see if anybody wants to prompt with their name. But otherwise, from my perspective, I'm good. But if there's other things you folks want to talk about in terms of what I showed, we can delve into that.
So what's the next thing you're working on? Like I know you've talked about trying to like clean up some of the UI and stuff like that, but like what's the next kind of feature that you want to add in?
It's this MCP stuff. So I've got a branch where I'm doing this work in, and I'm trying to get it to a point where it actually works reasonably well. Like, you know, it has reasonable fits reasonable expectations. I mean, honestly, I could upload what I have now as a new release and just leave it to people to figure out how to make this work with instructions or other things, but I'd rather just, you know, get it to a point where I'm comfortable that it does what it says on the tin before I put it out there, because I really don't want to put it out there and then I get like 500 issues. Well, this thing AI doesn't do what I want it to do. How do I make it do what I want? You know, I'd rather kind of spend more time with it and tuning it and getting it better and providing, you know, kind of a documentation or thoughts on how to get it to a good place than to throw it out in the world and, you know, like I said, deal with all of the requests for how do I make this work in a way that I would expect it to work.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm working on now. And then longer term, you know, I want to plug in Quadrant and play around with that and just see how that works in terms of managing the identity. But for that perspective, that's pretty much as far as I want to go with this project. Can't think of anything else that I would need to do beyond that.
Right.
There's always going to be, you know, with any open source project, Johnny, you got to fix bugs, tune things, improve the UI a little bit here and there. You know, like I said, I got some CSS issues in the newest version that I need to address, that kind of stuff. But all in all, I'm pretty happy with it. I should give a shout out to the chat component I'm using too, which is the React Chatbotify, it's called. That thing is really awesome. The way it works from a code perspective, you know, you saw when I attached the logs, it was a guided conversation flow. You actually just have a stanza you can do with all the steps you want, and you just tell, you know, this step goes to that step, this step goes to that step, and it just manages all of that for you, right? Like the first version of this, I think, was literally like 400 or 500 lines of TypeScript. It was dirt simple.
Oh, that's pretty great.
With that component to get it going. Yeah, it's a really nice chatbot component. I recommend it for anybody else that's working in React and needs that kind of functionality.
That's Chatbotify, right?
Yeah.
I was gonna say, I think, you know, Gerald, I think you have a very sensible approach to this of kind of like, this is what it is, right? And not trying to like build out a ton of additional like features and functionality and just doing it for the sake of doing it. I think that, you know, you're saying like, yeah, this is gonna figure out the authorization things, but like, this is it. This is what it's gonna do. I think that's a very sensible approach, because I do feel like making something that's very purpose built is better than trying to solve the world problems.
Oh my God, yes.
Absolutely.
We're all sitting here going, how many times have we seen things built for the sake of it being built?
I can tell you right now, like I'm working on something where like I just need to add one thing, but then like I get in the it's IT ADD, right? It's like, oh, it'd be cool if we could do this, or this would be cool, or well, what about this? Well, I could make this easier. And then like now you're in this rabbit hole of like just extra crap that you didn't need to do, and like you had this like very simple-ish task. Yeah, that's me anyways. Like I'm like 8 miles deep in freaking crap.
I mean, I'm doing it a little bit right now too. So I was you know, talking to my co-authors for, you know, this book I'm writing about this you know, reference architecture I want to put together for agentic ops and all this other stuff, and like going through the, okay, and then I'm going to like build the end-to-end demo. And I was like, they're like, wait, chill, girl, you have, they didn't say girl, they would never, but basically they're like, you have 30 pages allocated. We're already over page count. You're going to do an end to end, like show people how to stand this up end to end, or you're going to like give them the meat of what they need and leave them to fit. Like they know what, like if they're reading this book, they probably know how to do the, like the other bits around it. Like focus. Like, oh
yeah.
Right. Focus.
As my daughter would say, lock in.
Yeah, lock in is what they're like. Lock in. Let's go through this. What is the unique value add that you're trying to do here? And so then we like brought it down into like, okay, here's the unique value add. Now I still have to do a bunch of stuff to prove that what I'm writing about and all that all works. But like I can just be like, okay, well, I have some situation already set up over here, and I'll just do that on that versus walking through. Here's how you would set this up, and blah blah blah. Like, you know, go get a cluster. It's fine. You know what you're doing.
Yep.
I hope. But yeah, lock in. Good job, Gerald. Good locking in.
Focus.
Proud of you.
Focus. But yeah, that's like I said, that's it for me. So we made it pretty much right on time.
Exactly on time. Yeah. So I think we have another guest lined up for 2 weeks from now, Johnny.
I think so. Yeah.
Oh God, we're so bad at this. We've actually got most of the quarter filled in terms of guests and schedules, and yet we're so bad at remembering what they are without the calendar immediately in front of us. So whatever it is in 2 weeks, we'll announce right before, as we always do on LinkedIn, what the topic is. But we do have one. We're not flying by the seat of our pants this time. And yeah, I guess until then, Johnny, are you closing the stream or am I closing the stream?
I can do it.
Johnny's going to close the stream. We will remind you to choose your technical debt wisely, and we will see you in 2 weeks for episode 101.
See ya.